Hi everyone, welcome to Ask the Egg Whisperer. I love getting your questions. If you guys have a question and you want to send it in, just go to asktheeggwhisperer.com. It's really as simple as that. Paula will message you ahead of the show and let you know when I'll be answering your question so that you can watch live if you want, or you'll just be sent a link later and you can always tune in after it's recorded. So thank you guys for sending in all your questions. Let's get started. This first question is from Ashley. Ashley is from New York and she's 34 years old. And she says, "Hi, Dr. Aimee. I was just wondering if PCOS affected egg quality. And if it's true that someone with PCOS might be able to conceive for a longer period of time because they release eggs at a lower rate. I've heard this theory, but I wasn't sure about its veracity. Thanks." So the way I think about PCOS is it's HOPE syndrome. For those of you who don't know what HOPE stands for, it stands for a couple of things. For me, it stands for have only positive and practical expectations. But it also stands for, when it comes to PCOS, high levels of androgens, lots of eggs on your ovaries, periods that are irregular, and you just got to pay attention to eating and exercise. So those are the big picture things that I talk about when someone has PCOS. And what you'll notice is none of those things included: infertility, bad eggs, lots of eggs just sitting there that are going to be immature at the time of the egg retrieval. And I feel like because there are no two PCOS patients that are alike, it's really unfair for patients to be told things that are untrue. And I feel like a PCOS mythbuster every single day, literally. So let's just break this down. Can women with PCOS, are they able to conceive for a longer period of time? The answer is yes. There are some women who have PCOS who have more eggs later in life. So I have patients that come in and they're 40 and their AMH is 3 and they're worried that they have PCOS. And I'm like, hey now, I consider it a blessing because you have so many eggs. So there's going to be a higher chance that one of them is going to be genetically normal. And of course, age is the most reliable predictor of pregnancy. But the more eggs you have, the higher the chance that you can have a healthy pregnancy. As far as releasing eggs at a lower rate, it's not necessarily related to the later age at a final menstrual period, meaning a later menopause. It has more to do with just being born with maybe more eggs or the hormonal changes that have affected the ovaries, making it so that there are more eggs. But it's not necessarily related to the release of eggs at a lower rate. So I'm glad you asked that, because I literally get that asked so much. This next question comes from Olivia. She's 36 in Poland, and she says this: I'm 36, I have DOR, my AMH is 0.2. My BMI is 19, I don't smoke, I take prenatals and CoQ10. My doctor saw 3 follicles, 12 to 16 millimeters on day 9, and I was happy. If my body can make 3 naturally, I was expecting that even with a mini stem, I would get more than 3 follicles, at least 12 to 16 millimeters in size. I started my first IVF cycle hopeful, 10 days of androgel, 10 of estrofen, then 8 days of menopur and femera. On day 9, I had 7 follicles, but they were teeny tiny, only 3 to 5 millimeters. I'm trying to learn from this cycle to have better results in the next, but the only explanation my doctor gave me is, it's your body. This doesn't make sense to me. With all the meds and injections, my body has worse results than my natural cycle right before it. Why did I respond like that? What can I do better? So Olivia, here's the deal. I think your body was just too sensitive to the estrofen and androgel. The 10 plus days of priming with those medications, your ovaries just decided to take a little snooze. They're like, wake me up later. So that's the learning experience. The learning experience is your ovaries do not like to be suppressed. That's what I would take from this. And so I would just say, go with your gut, and your gut is that you should have a more natural cycle approach. And that's what I would do. So I would say, cycle day number 2, you can start the femera, the gonal F, and the menopur if it makes sense, given the number of eggs, or you just start with the femera, perhaps try 4 tablets per night, and then introduce the gonal F and menopur later. And I have a pretty good feeling that you're going to get a better response. So some cycles you might respond better than others. So I would just say, if the next cycle you start meds and it doesn't seem to be working the way you want, just wait and see what happens next time. And the other thing that you can do is just a random start, not necessarily waiting for your period, understanding that if you do that, you may not have an opportunity to do a fresh transfer because your lining might be out of sync. You might actually get your period right in the middle of the cycle, and you can't convert to an IUI cycle in that type of situation. So this next question comes from Sam. Sam is 43 from Springfield. You are so beautiful inside and out. Such a nice platform you've created. Why do we hear more girl babies born via IVF than boy babies? Is there a medical reason behind this? Any advice on how to strengthen the male chromosome? About to start IVF, and my doctor wants to put me on birth control. She says I'll be on it short term. It won't suppress my ovaries. I'm 43. My AMH is 1.05 and FSH is 5. So Sam, even just a short term of birth control pills can suppress your ovaries, and it's normal and good for us to always question everything that people are putting us on, and not second guess them, but just offer them an opportunity to perhaps think of things differently for you. And so if I had a patient who was 43, I certainly would want to get every single egg that I possibly could from your IVF cycle. And I would say, even if it's like 10 days of birth control pills or 14 days of birth control pills, that could decrease the number of eggs retrieved by even 1, and that could be statistically significant. So my thought process is maybe she needs to do that to coordinate your cycle so the egg retrieval falls on a day that she's working, and sometimes people do that, and that's okay. But it's nice for them to kind of tell you up front why they're doing that. You know, sometimes a patient will tell me that they need their egg retrieval to fall on a certain day, or maybe the doctor just needs the retrieval to fall on a certain day. So maybe seeing if you could maybe do like 1 or 2 days of birth control pills and not necessarily an entire course. That's what I would say you could suggest as an alternative. As far as more girl babies versus boy, I mean, it really just depends on the lab. A lot of labs actually do run statistics to see whether there's more boy and girl, and I would say I haven't seen that, and I actually have queried and asked that question in the lab because, you know, there are patients who would like a certain gender, and, you know, I never judge. I always want people to have a healthy baby, obviously, but if their goal is to have a girl, I'll try and support them, or a boy, if that's, again, what they want. So I guess it just kind of depends on the lab whether they see more girls or more boys, but in general, I haven't seen that it's more female than male. As far as what to do to strengthen the male chromosome, I mean, I think that's kind of a tough, I could make jokes, but I'm not going to. But I would say, you know, go to myballsmethod.com and just make sure that your partner, if you're partnered, has looked at all the elements in there to give you the best chance of a healthy pregnancy, and he's making his sperm as sparkly as possible going into your egg retrieval. This next question comes from Keisha from Canada, 40 years old. Hi, Dr. Aimee. Following my second miscarriage, 11 weeks, the first stopped at 5.5 weeks and the second at 12 weeks. However, I was 11 weeks pregnant when they found out that it had stopped at 5.5 weeks for the first one. I've been told my AMH is too low to freeze eggs and to test eggs. We've been advised to try naturally for 2 months, pregnant immediately both times using an app, and to try insemination or a fresh transfer if that doesn't work. We tested the last pregnancy and it was genetically normal. I'm currently taking supplements, NAD, CoQ10, and looking at some other you've recommended, but I haven't been prescribed anything to support pregnancy. What supplements are safe to continue after a positive pregnancy test if that happens? Do you agree with the doctor? What else might you suggest? And thank you for all your help and information. There's a lot to sift through. So Keisha, first of all, I'm really sorry that you had that experience, and I'm really quite appreciative of your doctor for taking that extra step to test the genetic material. And the thing is this, that if a pregnancy comes back genetically normal, and if it comes back with the same chromosomes as you have, if it's 46XX, depending on the technology that was used to test the pregnancy, it's very possible that it could be abnormal and it was just maternal cell contamination that they detected. Sometimes people think that their pregnancies are genetically tested, and they're told by very nice doctors that don't mean any harm that I tested the pregnancy and it was normal. But what they really are saying is they tested the pregnancy, they sent it to a pathologist who's a scientist that looks under a microscope at any tissues that they're being given, and the pathologist said, yes, this is a pregnancy. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they also looked at the chromosomes. So I think it's important to get all your official reports and see what's going on. And if indeed the pregnancy was analyzed and it was normal and it had normal chromosomes, then I would say it's really important to go through the Angel method. And the Angel method is looking for an autoimmune issue, looking at, let's say, antiphospholipid antibody, cardiolipin antibody, lupus anticoagulant, beta-2 glycoprotein 1, looking for Asherman syndrome, which is scar tissue in the uterus, making sure there isn't adenomyosis or another type of anatomic issue like a uterine septum, looking at, let's say, sperm DNA fragmentation. But those are the things that I think about when I've had a patient who has a miscarriage, especially when the genetics has come back as genetically normal. So that's just so hard, and I'm sorry. The strategies that I use for patients in cases like yours are progesterone support 3 days after ovulation until at least 10 weeks of pregnancy. And then also sometimes aspirin daily and even empiric Lovenox, which is a blood thinner. So there's so many different things and strategies we can use in a case like yours. And, despite your low AMH, obviously it seems like you are able to get pregnant, obviously. And so it may not be a bad idea to, before, I don't want you to necessarily spend more time on testing. I certainly want you to get pregnant again as soon as possible, but it might not be a bad idea to freeze some embryos if that's something that's possible for you, and then do some more evaluations soon after before you transfer the embryos. This next question comes from Leave, age 42, from Qatar. Initial ultrasound 9.5 millimeter lining, right ovary 2 to 3 follicles, left ovary 4 to 6 follicles. My husband has good sperm with a morphology of 3% normal forms. Total egg at the time of the retrieval were 20, injected 17, and I transferred 3 early blastocysts. Please advise the probable reason for IVF ICSI to not implant. Is another IVF worth a try? Are there chances that we can improve the sperm morphology? Thank you in advance. Please stay well. Thank you for doing these informative vlogs on YouTube. So Leave, here's what I would say. It's really hard to find an egg when you're over 40. And I would say the most likely reason for the embryos, the 3 that you transferred, for them not to have implanted is likely related to genetics of the embryo, most likely related to your age. And that's so unfair because I see my patients, they're coming in at 42 and they really look like they're, 25 to 28 to me. And I just see them as young, fertile people. And it just breaks my heart that we might be running out of healthy eggs before we've run out of our desire to have children. And I wish there was more that I could do other than, talking about all the supplements that we talk about. But the great news is that you have a really high egg count. The fact that they got 20 eggs for you is pretty fantastic. So I would suggest perhaps trying more cycles and perhaps, doing what you can to improve sperm morphology, as we know that every embryo takes an egg and a sperm cell by having him, live as healthy a lifestyle as possible, taking supplements, perhaps like CoQ10. Most people can take without any issues at all. So that's kind of what I'm thinking for you. And I would say you could also consider freezing the embryos, banking them, seeing if you can do implantation testing before you do a transfer. This next question comes from Fiona, age 35, in Ireland. I've had 2 miscarriages after removing stage 3 endometriosis. I just completed some natural killer cell levels, and I'm wondering what's causing this and what treatments might help keep me pregnant. So here's the thing, Fiona. Endometriosis, especially stage 3, can affect the lining of the uterus, and it can also affect egg quality. So whenever I think of endometriosis, I think that it's a fertility threatening condition, and I have to think about embryo viability, egg quality, and implantation issues, and what I can do to make sure that I've given my patient the best chance of implantation. And last but not least, endometriosis can block fallopian tubes and cause a hydrosalpinx, and that can also make it harder to get pregnant and stay pregnant. As far as the, natural killer cell levels, I feel like possibly the miscarriages could be unrelated to that, given the fact that we know that you have stage 3 endometriosis and you're 35 years old. So I would do what you can if you feel comfortable with it, to be as aggressive as possible to try and get pregnant, perhaps trying IVF, so that you can freeze embryos to secure future options for yourself. So that's what I would do. If you were a patient of mine here at 35, I would suggest that we do IVF to bank embryos, look and see and make sure that we've treated your endometriosis as much as possible before we do a transfer. See if you can do genetic testing of embryos. So those are the kinds of things that I would think about. And if If you don't have, let's say, access to things like the stuff that we do, like Lupron, I would say maybe talk to your doctor about taking letrozole, for example. There's another medication we use here called Orlissa that's very similar to Lupron. See if you have access to that. And sometimes taking 1 or 2 months before a transfer, if you have endometriosis, could potentially give you a better chance for pregnancy. But I'm really glad that you had the endometriosis removed. Anytime anyone does surgery on you, there's always a chance that there could be scar tissue. So that's why I'm thinking checking those fallopian tubes could be a good idea for you. This next question comes from D, age 31, in the Caribbean. My husband and I, 31 years old, did our first IVF cycle in November 2020. We don't have any children and thankfully got pregnant. I have stage 3 endometriosis and I took Zoladex for it, and I also have a fibroid. At the time of my IVF, the fibroid was 3 by 2 centimeters, and we ended up getting 6 eggs, 4 fertilized, 3 embryos made it to day 3, and only 1 made it to day 5. It was a 5AA. Everything was going great, but after 17 weeks, I started having cramps, and the cervix was already dilated, and we lost the baby. I'm sorry. The ultrasound showed the fibroid is now 5 by 5 centimeters. The IVF doctor has recommended a myomectomy because it grew, and I'm so drained. What advice can you provide? How can we increase our chances of more embryos? Should they increase the meds? What supplements can we take to make sure we get the best eggs, sperm, and embryos? So first of all, Deanne, again, I'm sorry for your loss. I would suggest banking more embryos, doing that now, and then do the myomectomy later. I don't think there's any emergency or rush to get the fibroid out. I think because of your age and the number of eggs that you retrieved, which were 6, I think it makes sense to bank more embryos first and then have the surgery, and then ask your doctor if there's a chance you might have adenomyosis. We know that adenomyosis can increase risk of miscarriage, and I would also not just consider removing the fibroid, but also potentially go back on Zoladex as well before you transfer again. So, I mean, those are just a couple of the things that come to mind. And, there's a supplement called N-acetylcysteine that I have my patients take who have stage 3 endometriosis. And then the other supplements like CoQ10, vitamin D, a good prenatal that has fish oil in it. Those are the kinds of things that can potentially help some people with egg and sperm quality. This next question comes from Mary, age 37 in New York. Hi, Dr. Aimee. I love listening to all the information you share with your viewers about IVF. You've kept me going with your never-ending optimism. I started my IVF journey September of 2020. I'm at the stage where I'm waiting for the second beta test for pregnancy. My first beta came back at 8 days post-ovulation, and I'm very nervous about the outcome. During IVF, I had 9 mature eggs, 3 were fertilized, and 2 were normal. My problem is this. On transfer day, I had told my doctor to use the 4AA embryo for the transfer, but the embryo got stuck as they were trying to flush it out. The time lapse spent was too long, and so that embryo was lost. I was completely in shock and very upset, but we still managed to use the other embryo, the 3BB, and do the transfer that day, and I'm left with no more embryos, and because of that, I'm seriously considering changing clinics. Do you recommend this? So I'm just so sorry about what you experienced. So what I would say is that what happened to you, while uncommon, is so rare of an event, I doubt that there's a high chance of recurrence and that it would happen again. I imagine that your clinic has offered you the same reassurances that I'm offering you, but I would listen to your gut and see what you think, and see if it makes sense for you to move to another clinic, or see if you feel like they know you well enough and know your story that they would do the very best job for you to help you reach your goals. So I don't necessarily think that what you experienced should cause you to leave the clinic unless you feel like there are other things that are red flags. And I'm sorry that you went through that. This next question comes from Nurul, age 32 in Malaysia. I want to know if I can get pregnant naturally after I've successfully had my first IVF baby last year. I don't want to do IVF again. I want to conceive naturally. Is it possible? I have PCOS. I'm ready for my second baby. So Nurul, it is possible. I started off this Ask the Whisperer episode, talking about PCOS and how I think of it as hope syndrome. So you got to look at all those things. Your androgen levels, are they high? If they are, bring them down. Your ovaries. We know they probably have a lot of eggs. Your periods, we know they're irregular probably because that's, part of PCOS for a lot of people. And then looking at eating, exercise, all that lifestyle stuff. So look at all the hormones that we like to make sure are balance when it comes to PCOS, your prolactin, your thyroid. And I also like to look at things like hemoglobin A1C or fasting glucose and testosterone levels. So there are medications you can use to balance everything out. You can use birth control pills, metformin, ovasitol, spironolactone, vitamin D supplements, thyroid medication, bromocriptine to lower prolactin. Once everything is balanced, then it's like all clear, thumbs up. Make sure sperm is sparkling, and then start ovulation induction medications. Most patients will respond really well to medications like Femera, another medication that I don't use, but Clomid can be used as well. But I think that just a little whiff of a fertility pill could result in a really healthy ovulation if you need that help, and hopefully a successful natural pregnancy without doing IVF. So go through my Tushy method, look at your tubes, look at sperm, look at the hormones that I just talked to you about, and it sounds like you've probably done all the genetic testing. And the reason why I'm saying you probably did is because you already did IVF. This next question comes from Kim, age 34 in California. Hi, Dr. Aimee. I'm 34. Recently, I was diagnosed as PCOS due to the number of follicles on my ovaries and my acne problem. Before I began my IVF journey, I was diagnosed with IBS, hypoglycemic, and severe vitamin D deficiency at 13. My question, is there any correlation between IBS, celiac disease, vitamin D deficiency, hypoglycemia, and infertility? If so, should I postpone my FET on April 30th? What can I do to give myself a better chance of having a successful IVF if I do decide to continue with the FET? So the thing is that IBS is connected with PCOS. So there is a relationship. As far as vitamin D being hypoglycemic, there have been very nice studies done looking at people who are transferring an embryo that has normal chromosomes and looking at their vitamin D levels to see if people who have low vitamin D have a lower rate of implantation. It actually does not seem to be that big of a deal. However, for me, I know that vitamin D deficiency can potentially increase someone's risk of having early onset, potentially. Again, just because I'm saying this doesn't necessarily mean it's so. Early onset, not necessarily early onset, but a higher risk of Alzheimer's, dementia, breast cancer, and in pregnancy, a baby with autism. So that's why I check vitamin D, not necessarily because deficiency can affect your chances of a healthy implantation, although who knows, maybe in some people it could. So I think getting your vitamin D up is important. I don't necessarily think that it needs to delay your transfer. This next question is from Lauren, age 29 in California. I have one child who's 3, no issues conceiving her after 8 years of being on birth control. We've been trying for baby number 2 for almost 2 years. In the first 5 months of trying, I had 1 6.5-week miscarriage and 2 chemicals. The next 9 months, I couldn't get pregnant at all. I started seeing a fertility doctor, and since then I've had 2 failed IUIs and 1 6-week miscarriage from an FET. We did PICSI and PGT, and all 10 embryos were genetically normal. And we also have 4 additional that are untested. The known issues are low morphology and moderate DNA frag, 2 MTHFR gene mutations on my end, and everything else is normal. I'm waiting for the results from my ERA and Receptiva DX. Is there anything else I could be checking or taking to reduce the chances of another miscarriage? So I think that you've done everything on my list, and based on what you're describing, I do think the Receptiva DX test could probably give you some more information as to what you could do differently. I would also take time to look again at your fallopian tubes. Anytime I hear this number of biochemical pregnancies, I'm always wondering if there's something that the fallopian tubes are doing that's getting in the way of a healthy implantation. As far as the moderate DNA fragmentation, is it possible this is related to sperm DNA? It's possible. I imagine your fertility doctor has also thought about empiric use, and empiric means without any evidence that it's really needed, empiric use of Lovenox. So Lovenox is a blood thinner. In a case like yours, it's something that I would potentially consider doing. So I think you're in a really good center. You shared with me who your doctor is. I just didn't say it out loud, but I do think she's awesome. And I feel like you've done everything. You did the PICSI already when you were using the sperm for your IVF cycle because of the sperm DNA. So I'm just really hoping that everything will work out really well for you with this next transfer, especially because we know that you had no issues conceiving your child that's age 3. So I hope your next transfer is great. I know you had the HSG, and I'm not sure when you had it, but if it was more than a year ago, maybe consider doing it again. This next question comes from Mary, age 34 in New York. Hi, Dr. Aimee. I'm 34. My husband and I are dealing with secondary infertility. After 15 months of trying to conceive baby number 2 in January 2021, I was diagnosed with severe DOR, AMH of 0.6. We went right into IVF in February. High doses of Gonal-F and Menopur. I got 4 eggs, 2 fertilized, and 1 made it to an early blast. It was transferred and failed. Our doctors say these results point to poor egg quality and poor embryo development. She recommended IUI with Gonal-F, as another IVF would not give us much benefit with such low egg count and poor eggs. She gave each IUI cycle a 5% shot of success. This plan feels like a step backwards, and it's shocking to me. Since our son was conceived easily on our first try in October of 2016, was he a miracle, or has my egg quality plummeted since then? My husband's latest analysis showed sperm count morphology 33 million. Is it worth getting a second opinion, or should we proceed with IUI? So Mary, I think it is worth getting a second opinion. With your AMH and your FSH, the fact that you were able to get 4 mature eggs not that long ago makes me think there's still hope. If you haven't, let's say, tried different types of protocols, maybe adding HGH and other supplements, I think there's still a chance that you could have another miracle. I also think if you haven't done genetic testing, like a Fragile X screen or a chromosome analysis, even though you have a healthy child at home, I still feel like sometimes we miss the opportunity to give people an explanation for what's going on with them, because if they have a child, sometimes we don't think that maybe the reason for the poor embryo progression and quality could be, let's say, due to a chromosomal issue from either the egg or the sperm source. So I would say, I think it's worth getting a second opinion. You're in New York. There's so many fabulous doctors there. And I'm not saying your doctor is not fabulous. I'm saying they're being realistic and they're giving you a practical set of expectations. But I think that if you still want a chance with your own eggs, you're young at 34, there's no reason to think that you can't try again if you want. This next question comes from Anna, age 29, from India. Please let me know how to improve exactly egg quality. I have POI and low AMH. My AMH is below 1. I had a miscarriage once was 6 months ago, and then I had another one, and then that one stopped at 8 weeks of pregnancy. I want a healthy pregnancy with my own eggs only, and I want one baby. It's very depressing to battle with a low egg count and unable to conceive. Currently, I'm 4 weeks pregnant naturally again, but I need to be successful and healthy. So Anna, here's what I would do. Since we don't necessarily know what workup you've had, this would probably be too late to do some sort of workup, but I would say let's just assume that maybe progesterone will help you. So I would ask your doctor for progesterone if they haven't done that for you already. They can always certainly check a progesterone level or give you progesterone supplementation. The other thing is we don't know if you have a thrombophilia, so perhaps taking aspirin daily, 81 milligrams, might be one strategy to help prevent miscarriage for you. And then I really hope that this pregnancy is as healthy as possible, but doing an early ultrasound, which I bet you plan on doing, can give you reassurances. And I hope that you reach back out and share with us that this pregnancy is a healthy one. This next question comes from Seppi, age 35, from Phoenix, Arizona. Hi, Dr. Aimee. I'm 35, and we had 2 back-to-back miscarriages. First one was a chemical, second one at 9 weeks after a confirmed strong heartbeat. All the fertility tests came back normal, except my FSH was 10, AMH is 1.4. My doctor wants to do the Receptiva DX test, as she thinks it's implantation due to endometriosis. I have no signs or symptoms. My husband's sperm counts are great. His morphology was low, though. She's not concerned because she thinks he has a lot of it. I've done research and saw so many doctors getting this test done before IVF, so I don't know why she wants me to do the test even before trying IUI or something else. I just don't want to go through Lupron treatment if his sperm morphology or my eggs are the problem. Have you ever ordered that test on your RPL patients besides your IVF patients? Thanks for your time. So Seppi, I actually have done the Receptiva DX test in patients who are not IVF patients if they don't want to do IVF and they have symptoms of endometriosis and they don't necessarily want to go through a laparoscopy to find out. So I do think questioning why you're doing this test makes sense. So I would say the reason for the back-to-back miscarriages probably is related to the genetics of the embryo more than 50% of the time. Go through my Angel Method. It's angelmethod.com. Go through that checklist and see what you've done. And whatever you haven't done, be sure to ask for those tests, or at least talk to your doctor about them to see if they recommend them for you. With the sperm morphology being low, the first thing that comes to my mind is sperm DNA fragmentation testing. So ask your doctor how you can get that done. I send my patients to the SCSA Diagnostics website, and you can just order it yourself without a doctor's order. And if you find yourself pregnant, which would be fabulous always, I know it can be always scary when you've had 2 miscarriages, I would suggest requesting progesterone support, taking an aspirin, but be sure to do a lot of the tests that we often think of doing for patients who have RPL, which stands for recurrent pregnancy loss. This next question comes from Laura, age 35 in Puerto Rico. Which sperm bank do you recommend the most? Thank you. So my top sperm bank is Seattle Sperm Bank is my top pick. And then we have California Cryobank, we have Fairfax, we have Zytec, and those are the next ones on my list. And here locally in the Bay Area, we have the Sperm Bank of California in Berkeley. So those are my faves sperm go-to banks. So I hope that helps you. This next question comes from Charlie, age 33 in Houston. Hi, Dr. Aimee. I'm 33 years old. I just did my first round of IVF. We were able to freeze 4 embryos with the following grading: day 6 hatching 5AA, day 6 hatch 6AA, day 6 blastocyst 4AA, and day 6 blastocyst 4AB. I have PCOS, and we're trying for our first child. Looking at the grades, which one do you suggest we transfer first? I'm going to pick the day 6 5AA. Sold. I just felt like saying that. That sounded fun. Also, do you suggest we do an ERA? My prolactin level is 25. So as far as the ERA, I would say you want to ask yourself, how many children do you want? Okay, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4 really strong embryos. If let's say you really were hoping for 2 to 3 kids, and especially leaning on the 3-child side, I would say do your ERA. Don't transfer your embryos, even if they're fabulous, without getting all the information ahead of time. However, with the number of embryos you have, if you're like 1 or 2 children, you have 4 embryos. So the likelihood of you needing all 4 for 2 kids is actually on the lower side. But you can also do the ERA if your first transfer doesn't work, but that's kind of not my style. So if you haven't had a saline sonogram, sometimes you can take advantage of the ERA test and kind of do it all at once. Do the ERA, the Receptiva DX test, the saline sonogram all together as one test. So I do talk to every single one of my patients about the ERA, no matter how many embryos you have, and then we make the decision together as to whether you want to do it or not. Next question is from Lorraine, age 43 from Antioch. Late bloomer here, married in 2019. The same year had intercourse the first time in my life. 40-year-old virgin. Love it. June 2020, started improvement with intercourse. Since it's my first time for me, it's not comfortable. My husband is very understanding. Now I'm better, but not sure if we're doing it right. Intercourse is what I'm talking about. Want to know I'm not getting pregnant, never seen an OB/GYN my entire life. My dream is to be the best mommy. I have faith it will happen. Need to know what the next step is. I'm 43 regular cycles. Okay, here you go, Lorraine. I'm not going to tell you to watch videos about how to have sex, because let me tell you, I think you're going to be traumatized. But what I'll also tell you, there should be no shame in talking to your OB/GYN and saying, I just don't know if we're having sex right. I actually have patients who've come to me probably at least 2 or 3 a year, where I actually have to teach them about exactly, I'm not going to show it with my hands, but I think you know what I mean. As far as penetration, how deep to go, and then at the end of the day, if you're like, this is way too comfortable, or uncomfortable, I should say, we always have the Aimee baby. And that's the home insemination kit. So you can even do this at home. You get a cup, you get a syringe, you collect in here, you draw it up, you put the syringe without a needle on at the top of the uterus, kind of like a tampon. But you can work with a pelvic floor physical therapist who specializes in this stuff, and they'll totally help you. And they can help you with dilators, and they can talk you through everything. But at the end of the day, at 43, it would be really helpful to get to a fertility doctor who can assess your ovarian reserves and talk to you about options while you still have them. Not every 43-year-old, I'm just going to say it out loud, still has the chance to get pregnant with their own eggs. But I think going to a fertility doctor or even your OB/GYN and getting your hormone levels checked, I think would be the first step. Getting sperm checked, next step. Carrier screening, next step. Tubes checked, probably not as important for you because you've never had sex. And then ultrasound to look for fibroids and polyps and endometriosis. So I really hope that whatever you do is going to lead you to the baby that was meant to be for you. This next question is from Christy, age 40 in San Francisco. Hello, and thanks for all you do. I have 2 questions. First, I recently had my first transfer. It was unsuccessful. I'm fortunate that I have additional embryos. Before I transfer another, I'm planning to get the COVID vaccine. How much time do you recommend between the second dose and the embryo transfer? The answer is 2. The second dose and the embryo transfer, ideally I want my patients fully vaccinated, so that's 2 weeks from your second shot, ideally. How much time do you recommend between the second? Oh, I just answered that. Second, at this point, I'm not sure why the transfer failed. All my embryos have been genetically tested. I was on letrozole, Ovitril protocol. My lining was over 11. My progesterone was 20 at the time of transfer. I found out that the transfer was unsuccessful 7 days post-transfer when my period began. I was so surprised to get my period so soon after transfer. I would be surprised too. And I'm wondering if that suggests to you that I should change my timing or a different protocol. For context, I have advanced endometriosis in a short cycle. So Christy, you just said the word endometriosis. That could be the reason why. I would recommend that you consider treating endometriosis if you have it. Ask your doctor if you also have adenomyosis. It is lovely that you have tested embryos. I don't know how many you have, but this might be a great time to kind of make sure that you have enough embryos for the family size that you want. This would be the great time, since you're 40, to get more embryos made, because if you have endometriosis, it might be harder to have a successful implantation, and I think that's really important to hear and talk to your doctor about. I would suggest that regrouping and reconnecting with your doctor about a different transfer protocol, especially since you had your period 7 days after your transfer, makes perfect sense. And perhaps consider the ERA test and a medicated cycle. For my patients who have endometriosis, I can certainly do a medicated cycle with them, but the way I do it is I actually have you take estrase and then letrozole every single day. This next question comes from Bindi, age 45 in Illinois. Will embryo glue increase my chances of implantation? So that's a great question. Embryo glue is something that every clinic kind of has. They have their own version of it. Everyone has their little special sauce in the lab that they use around the embryo to try and give the embryo the best chance of sticking and growing. Embryo glue is a trademark name for something that it is not. There's no such thing as embryo glue. It's like saying embryo tack or embryo staple gun. There's no such thing. This next question comes from Kathy, age 41 in LA. Dr. Aimee, I take milk thistle for chronic liver disease. Is it safe to take during IVF stem? And the answer is, if you were my patient and you needed milk thistle, I would say it is okay to take. I read on various fertility blogs that plastic containers and various fragrances and soap shampoos should be avoided. What are your thoughts on that? So I would say it's really hard to avoid plastics and fragrances 100%, but certainly I think that, if you have the option to pick shampoos that are fragrance-free for the most part, and avoid plastic containers as much as you can, I would say do that. My biggest pet peeve is receipt paper. I had a patient once, this was like 10 years ago, and she actually wrote on her new patient consult, this is when everything was being written, that her allergies were receipt paper. And I was like, receipt paper? That's so weird. But then I realized there was nothing weird about it. She was right on the money when it comes to being super careful about receipt paper, because receipt paper is known to have BPA in it. So I actually never say yes to receipts when I go shopping, which happens rarely because I don't go anywhere except here to the office. But I never touch the receipt. I always say, please, I don't want my receipt. Email it to me or put it in the bag so that I'm not touching it at all. This next question comes from Kathy. Oh, that was Kathy. This next question comes from Mia, age 38 from Switzerland. I'm about to start an IVF cycle, but I would like to know what the long-term effects of the hormones on women's bodies can be. Can they be dangerous? There's little or no information on what the long-term effects are, and it seems crucial to me to know them. My mother died of lung cancer at 47, so I want to know if I'm more at risk of developing a disease by administering hormones. Thank you. So Mia, I would suggest that you do a genetic carrier screen for cancer genes. There's about 61 cancer genes that we can test patients for routinely to see if you're at higher risk. First of all, I'm sorry that your mother passed away from lung cancer. And if you have a high-risk cancer gene, you are at higher risk of having cancer, but by knowing about the gene, you can hopefully catch it before it's at a stage where it could cause you to die young. And I certainly don't want that to happen to you. And so I would not be nervous if you found out that you had a cancer gene about doing IVF. I would say this is an opportunity for you to consider perhaps doing PGTM, which means screening the embryos for that gene before you transfer them. My biggest concern about IVF is the long-term risk of depression, anxiety, and PTSD. I am not concerned about breast cancer, ovarian cancer, They do not cause you to go through an earlier menopause. They do not cause infertility. However, women who have endometriosis, adenomyosis, it could potentially worsen those conditions. So if that's a known thing that you have, that is something for your doctor to talk to you about, and you can bring it up with them. This next question comes from Magdalena, age 36, from Poland. I'll be 36 in May, almost 3 years trying, currently almost 1 year in a fertility clinic. My AMH is high at 8. I have zona pellucida antibodies. Oh, that is so cool. I don't know how you know that. I want to find out more. I'm going to have to research this. My husband's sperm is okay. Morphology, DNA frag, all tested. Karyotypes, normal. My doctor diagnosed me with PCOS and 4 unsuccessful stimulated cycles with Femera and 1 IVF cycle, 14 eggs, 12 fertilized, 4 BB, 3 BB blasts, 2 from day 6, not tested, 3 failed transfers. I don't know what to do next. And what to ask my doctor for on my next appointment before starting over with the second cycle. Is there still hope for me? And the answer is yes, I would say so. I would say consider doing another cycle with genetic testing. If you still don't want to do genetic testing, consider doing a chromosome analysis, do a really thorough cavity evaluation, and do implantation tests like the ERA and Receptiva DX test. But I still think there's hope for you. I've certainly had patients just like you who've had the same experiences that you've described, who have been successful. And I think what you have in common with them is your age, number one, your good ovarian reserve, and your willingness to ask the question, is there still hope? So I would say there certainly is. This next question comes from Anna, age 34, from Europe. Hi, Dr. Aimee. I had my egg retrieval and we got 2 more eggs than the number of follicles. 17 follicles punctured and 19 eggs. I found very limited information about this. Share your knowledge. We also had 3 eggs that were fertilized by 2 sperm cells. How often do you see this problem happen? So Anna, I would say when I go in and I get more eggs out than I expected, it's because there were little tiny ones that that were growing. They might even have popped up since the last ultrasound. They're super small. And the eggs that I usually get out are not mature. So I don't really think that it's a mystery and that there were 2 eggs in 1 follicle. As far as 3 eggs fertilized by 2 sperm cells, we call that an abnormal fertilization, and it is not uncommon. The next question comes from Gracie, age 39, in Colorado. Hi, Dr. Aimee. I'm 39. I'll be 40 in a few weeks. My AMH is 0.89. My day 3 estradiol 35. FSH is 5. My partner's sperm is great, but I have blocked tubes. My doctor also says there's probably adenomyosis, but it shouldn't affect any part of the IVF process. We did 1 round of IVF, 300 gonal, 75 Menopure, Lupron, Novaril trigger, 5,000 units, and got less follicles than I had when we did the baseline pre-IVF and pre-supplements. I had 10 to 11 for 2 ultrasounds. We ended up with 6 eggs, only 2 blastocysts, both abnormal. I'm currently taking Ovasitol, CoQ10, melatonin, omega-3, and preconception pills. My doctor wants to try ICSI and asked me to add DHEA. I also have to have a polypectomy. If we don't get any normal embryos this round, they think it's best to stop trying, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are. I would like to keep trying, but I don't know if I'm being unrealistic. Thank you for all you do. So first of all, Gracie, your experience at 39 of having 1 cycle and having no normals, extremely common. I tell my patients, look, it might take several cycles for you even to get 1 healthy embryo when you're 39 or above. The good news is that you're still making mature eggs are fertilizing and they have enough energy to get to the blastocyst stage. When it comes to the abnormalities that they saw in your embryos, I think it's really important to ask and make sure, are they mosaic or not? It's really important for every single person out there who's doing genetic testing of their embryos to make sure that you know the policy and protocol in place to report mosaicism and transfer mosaic embryos as well. So that's something that I would want you to know before you discard the embryos that have been called abnormal. But as far as your situation, most people with adenomyosis, not most, I should qualify that and say a lot of people also have endometriosis. So endometriosis can affect egg quality, not just your age at 39 being, another issue, an issue that we just have to understand and work with. But I would celebrate the positives here and start supplements like N-acetylcysteine. Consider adding NAD. I like pterostilbene as well. I am not a fan of DHEA, but I would just listen to your doctor about what they're saying for you and why. I would ask your doctor if they would be open to having you take HGH. I like to prime with HGH and use it during the cycle as well. And then the other thing to consider before you transfer, obviously, are the implantation tests that I commonly talk about here. And then you can coordinate that all at the same time as a polypectomy, so you can go right into a transfer for hopefully your successful pregnancy. But I would be practical in terms of your planning and talk about all possible options to be a mom. And I would say that it is still reasonable that you could be successful. It might take more than one cycle, but I don't think it's silly to be hopeful. I think you guys know what I say, hope never killed anybody. And there's no reason not to be positive, excited to try again, and just get fired up to bring that baby home and visualize it. And if it doesn't happen, you've talked about all the possibilities already about what will help you be a mother. And I'll say it again, it's going to happen one way or another, as long as you believe that. Okay, guys, well, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm going to have to hop off because I have patients waiting for me. I still have consults to do tonight. So I'm sorry I can't answer your live chatted questions, but I love every single one of you. I wish I could be here and just stay here all day long and answer questions from morning till night, literally. Okay, have a great night, everybody. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.